Hi, I'm Shaté, and I am a creative strategist and storyteller. I'm so excited to share conversations with Pearl today.
Hey, everybody, it's Pearl Chiarenza with Women's Successful Living, and you are listening to another Conversations with Pearl today. And I'm so excited to have our special guest with us. She is a creative strategist and storyteller. Shaté Hayes is on a mission to help professionals everywhere feel a sense of purpose and pride in their careers. She spent over a decade in her first career as a professional dancer and choreographer, making stories come to life on stages. And as an EdTech leader, she embedded strategy and storytelling into the career programs her team delivered for the thousands of professionals they served. Now, as a consultant and founder of Career Steward, Shaté helps creative women organize and monetize their independent work so they can win contracts, funding, or influence. I'm so excited to have this fun conversation today. And welcome to the show, Shaté.
Thanks so much for having me, Pearl. Happy to be here.
Yay. So I always start the show off a little fun thing. We think back. In fact, I was talking about this with a client today. I was talking about our inner child when we were a little girl, the things that we told ourselves or what happened to us. But one of the things is, when we're little, we have these big dreams of what we want to be when we grow up. We're in school and like, what do you want to do when you get bigger? Right. And so oftentimes, women want to be lawyers or nurses or maybe even a president of the United States someday. Right. So when you were younger, what I always like to know is what did you want to be when you grew up, when you were that little girl? But then how does it correlate to what you're doing today? So will you share with the audience, like what was your dream, when you were that little girl thinking about your teacher or your mom asked you, what do you want to be when you grow up? And now how does that correlate to what you're doing today?
I'm cheesing so hard because I love answering this question because it's such a go figure oxymoron kind of thing. I'm a person who works in the career space, but when I was growing up, I didn't have anything I wanted to be. When I grew up, I didn't have a thing, a strong burning desire to be a certain thing. I remember thinking like, I thought like ice skaters were really cool. And the only thing I earnestly like had a true sincere desire to be when I grew up was like my mom. Like that's the only thing I ever said. Like, "Oh, I want to be like my mom." And thinking about my younger self, I can imagine like I still adore her. Like what I probably saw as a young child is someone who was like, she just seemed so cool and like her job seemed really important and it was like a corporate-ish kind of job, but it wasn't like the suits or anything. It was just like she was always sort of like showing plans and like making things happen, and she just seemed like she can do anything. And the way that that translates now to me is a couple of ways. One, as a child, I was just like super happy and free and just like always following my bliss, like just doing happy things. I'm still sort of kind of doing that in my career, and that I have, found ways to monetize so many things that bring me joy. And then the other thing is, I actually am a lot like my mom now, sometimes too much, but like s- sort of planning, doing multiple things, corporate-ish kind of things. It's interesting. Yeah. So it didn't have a name, I guess is what I would say. I didn't know to say like businesswoman or entrepreneur or something like that as a child, but I definitely have my own version of that in my own life.
I love that. I love that it was your mom who like kind of gave you this sort of free spirit to do whatever you wanted to do. And you were watching her, be this strong woman in what she was doing and how much she enjoyed it. Right. That's what I got from you and listening to you. Like your mom was showing you no matter what you do, you have to enjoy it. It needs to make you feel like, oh my gosh, I'm going to get up and go do this thing. Right. Because oftentimes when I work with my clients in coaching, they'll be like, oh, I got to go to work today. I'm like, okay, so what about that work doesn't make you feel good? Like, how do we fix that? How do we, until you change and figure out what kind of job you want, like, how do we help you enjoy this world and this job you're in right now? And I love that your mom set that example for you. Like, enjoy what you do, no matter what it is. So not having a thing was a cool thing because of the fact
Yeah.
that you're like, I can do whatever I want as long as it fills my cup. That's what I got
Hmm.
from that. And I think that's such a beautiful lesson that, those that are listening to us, if you have littles at home, boys or girls, it doesn't matter, your kids at home, like really talk to them, have conversations about, look at the things they like to do and just let them know, I remember when I was in school, I turned 60 last month. So when I
Ooh,
was in
happy
school,
birthday.
thank you. And I don't feel 60, just so everybody
and
understands.
and you don't look it, so you look
Thank you,
great.
beautiful. So the whole thing was like when I went to school, it's like you're going to graduate school, you're going to get a job, and you're going to get married, right? And I was like, that's not what I wanted. I wanted to be a teacher growing up. I thought I wanted to be an elementary school teacher, but my path didn't lead me into college to go do that. But full circle, like with you, I teach today. I do what I
Mhm.
want to do, but I have fun with it. I teach women how to step into that power of enjoying, like what you said, what your mom gave you the example of, but have fun no matter what you're doing, whether it's in your relationship, whether it's, a job or whatever that is, enjoy it because life is short. Like life
Yeah.
is way too short for us to not enjoy it. So I love that you shared that with us. So talk us like okay, so your early career was dance and stuff. Like that
Mhm.
sounds so
Mhm.
cool. That was one thing so as a little girl, in middle school, I wanted to be a cheerleader. And
Mhm.
I learned early on that if you weren't in the clique, you weren't going to get picked.
Yeah.
Right. So
Okay.
I learned that really early on when I went to school in North Carolina. And so I tried out for cheer. I practiced so hard, Shaté, so hard on all the routines and everything. And I went and I kind of got laughed at. And I was
Mm.
like, shush, shush. But I always was like, I wanted to do, in fact, my dream job, my bucket list job to still to do this day is go be a character at Disney World. That's like my bucket
Wow.
list job. If I could have a day in the life of a character at Disney, I don't even care what character it is, to be able to go do that, be so free with it. Like that's what me. So when you're on that, up there on that stage and you're doing all that, tell us like what was that like and what led you to that version of yourself?
Yeah, I want that for you too, Pearl. Like, I hope you get that dream. It was just like, I guess, my childhood, just joy. And it sounds a little cliche and it sounds a little privileged, but quite honestly, it's the truth. Like, I've never not danced. So I think I started dancing probably at the age of like 3 or 4. And my parents put me in dance classes for some grace. Like, I was just clumsy. I was always like running into things. So it wasn't even like, ooh, I want to be in a dance class. It was like, girl, you've got to figure out how to walk and stop running into things. So let's put you in the classes and see what happens. And so it started as like, creative movement when you're a kid and you get a little bit of ballet, a little bit of tap, and you get to have fun and be free. And my mom always says that the dance instructors would say to her, like, she's got a lot of potential. And my mom would be like, that's a thing they say to keep you paying, like to keep you coming back. But I literally stayed in it and I like literally kept getting better. And so by the time I was 10, I was like already doing competitive dance and in a jazz company and like really some very serious, like missing sleepovers on a Friday night because I had like 4-hour dance rehearsals, like that kind of serious. And it's just something I've done in my entire life and I loved it. So what actually ended up happening is I went to college and because I hadn't pursued anything more serious, like I didn't want to go to sort of like a performing arts high school. I wanted a traditional high school experience because I didn't like, try to go do ALE or something like that. My mom was like, well, when you get to college, don't try to do this dance thing. But I still performed. Like I was literally always performing my entire life. So by the time when I got out of college, I was like, I don't want to do a job that I just tolerate. I don't want to hate what I'm doing all day, every day. I want to like love it. And so I sort of did like a little minimal soul searching. It was like very surface level. And I was like, well, what do I really love? And it was performing. Like that's the thing that has been the constant in my life. So I was like, you know what? I'm going to go to LA. I'm going to figure out how to be a dancer. And like the rest is the rest is history. But I mean, lots of crying and nuances and like, what the heck are you doing, girl? Conversations in between there. But that was really how it happened. It was like, no, 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 no. I still enjoy this. Can it be a career? Because at the time, I also say this. I'm trying not to make it so long-winded, but at the time, I didn't grow up with cable. So when I was starting my dance career as a commercial dancer, a lot of dancers would be like, oh, when I saw Janet Jackson's Rhythm Nation, or when I saw Michael Jackson, remember the time, or whatever the thing is, when I saw whatever the video was, they had this reference point that was like, ooh, that's how I know what I want to be when I grow up. I didn't grow up with that. And so I didn't have I didn't even know it was a thing, right? To be a performer with like artists or stage plays or things like that. I just knew Nutcracker and Alien. So it wasn't until middle school, high school, whenever In Living Color, the show was out, and I was like, oh, I want to be a fly girl. So your dream is Disney. My two dreams are I still want to be a fly girl on In Living Color, and I still want to like work with Beyonce. But yeah, it was just that. It was like I'm gonna go figure out how to make this joyous like experience that I have into something I can do every day.
I love that because like even like if we go back to our previous conversation, your mom, one of the things I heard you say is you wanted to do something that's going to bring you joy. You grew up that way. You saw your mom doing that. So you knew right away I wasn't just going to go do this thing because that's what I have to, a job. I want to be having fun. And you're right because I remember when In Living Color came out, it was so much
Hmm.
fun to watch that show. And I think it's so cool. Like you said, people had these references, but we each like, there's always that one thing that says, oh, that's what I want to do. Right. We all have, if we
Hmm.
think about, oh, we have that one thing. Like for me, I had a favorite teacher. That's why I wanted to be a teacher. I loved my teacher in third grade, but it was like that thing. And so I think that's so awesome. And so you left, where were you living before you went out to California to go do this thing?
So I'm originally from Houston. I went to college in Atlanta. And so it was right after college, I had come back to Houston for like a year. And I was like, you know what? I'm not staying here. I'm going to go dance. And then I moved to California
Okay,
a
so
year
let's
after
talk
college.
about the conversation you have with your mom. I've just done 4 years at school, mom, and now I'm going to go off to California and I'm going to go be a dancer, right? I can just see your mom going, "Oh my gosh!" And okay, let's talk about. We hear all the Hollywood stuff. We hear all that talk, and let's be honest. There's a lot of stuff that is not
Yeah.
good that's come out of there. So
Yeah.
of course I'm putting my mama hat on. I'm thinking about your mom sitting there going, oh my God, my daughter just did 4 years of school and now she wants to go this. How did she respond to that?
Oh my goodness, the amount of tears that were in that conversation. It's funny, I can laugh at it now, but it didn't feel fun at the time. She was like, "You're doing what? Like we just spent all this money for you to go to school and you're gonna do what?" And she was kind of like, "You could have stayed here in Houston and gone to college if you were gonna end up doing that." But in my defense, I didn't know that's what my path was gonna be. Up until that point, I sort of just did what was expected of me. And then after college, I was like, well, if I'm going to live this life, what do I want? And so in my defense, I didn't know that's what I would do. I didn't know that that's what I could do, quite honestly. It was just like not even on my radar. So there were lots of tears and lots of like, I don't understand on both ends, but I kept planning anyways. I put a plan together. I was like, no, I'm going to find an apartment. I'm going to save my money. I'm going to, like I started taking private lessons and classes in Houston before I left. And once she saw how serious I was, then she got on board and she like moved me herself. She drove me to California. And so she's always my biggest supporter. And she told me after the fact, like, I just didn't know how to help you. Like, I don't have any connections there. I don't know anything about that world. I don't know how to protect you if you make this path. And so.
I think that's what it comes down to is that she wanted to make sure you were protected, right? I think
Yeah, yeah.
that's a big thing. And you brought up something I want to touch on for a second. I remember when our son Matthew, our oldest, went off to college. He did his first year in college. He did one school and then he transferred to another school. And at the end of the first year, he's just like, I just don't want to do this. And as parents, you always want better for your kids. Like my husband
Yeah.
went to college. I didn't go to college. I saw the difference between the two of us, and we wanted that for him. But we had to sit down and be like, okay, let's embrace that. If you don't want to do that, let's talk about it. So I can understand where your mom is coming from. And I could see you like having the conversation. And I think we have to remember that. So if the listeners that are listening, if you are a parent and your child comes back, honest to goodness, we have to embrace. I mean, sometimes we fight it. I mean, for a little bit inside of me, because my upbringing was, I didn't have the opportunity. It was a little bit of fight going, everybody should go to college, but we have to embrace too that sometimes it's not for everybody.
Yeah.
And like you said, you kind of were doing it like you're going through the motions, like this is what I'm expected to do, right? And
Exactly.
and so those that are parents that are listening, that's why, especially like so young, like really open a space. I share oftentimes on here and when I coach and talk on other podcasts, I share how my kids were probably middle school, and I think Nate was still in elementary school when I had a mentor. I would see him every Wednesday, twice a week. He had two kids, so twice a week I would see him at a little cafe that I would drive by every morning on my way to work, and I would see him with a different one of his kids each week. And so I asked him. I said, "Hey, you do that every week?" It's like, "Yeah, this is our time together. I started when they were babies before they could even talk. I did it to give my wife a break." And then he said he found like he was having conversations with them, even as babies. He goes, they could have cooed at me. It didn't matter. I was spending time with them. He said, but what he did is he created. So parents that are listening, listen up. he created this safe space table is what he called
Mm,
it. And he said, this table, he goes, especially as they got older and they could really, and they got to school and things like that. He created the table to say, you can tell me anything you need to tell me, good, bad, or indifferent. And as he got older, he's like, sex, drugs, rock and roll. As long
mhm.
as you haven't broken the law, it stays between us. Like he was like, it, and I won't tell mom unless I feel like it's something she needs to know. Right. So he created that space, you know, and I was like, wow, I really like that. So I started to
Yeah.
incorporate some of those, not every week, like dinner, lunches, or anything with my kids, but I created safe space to say, hey, let's go. You know, my one son loves movies. My other son loves sushi. So let's go and have sushi. And then as they got older, it became an opportunity for them to say, hey, mom, do you want to go to the movies? Or hey, mom, do you want to go for sushi? Then I knew they wanted to have a conversation, like something was on their mind, right? So for
Yeah.
those that are listening, it's never too late to start this. It doesn't matter how old your kids are, but like to have that space so that like with you can create the understanding that says to your kids, listen, yes, everybody should go to college. And if you really on your heart don't feel like it's right for you, let's talk about it. But you have to
Mhm.
have a plan, right? We don't do anything without a plan. It's, you know,
Exactly.
so because we have to support ourselves. And you know, oftentimes I'm seeing some of the generation now, like that 25 to 30-year-old going, why do I have to pay the government money? And you know, I hear that all the time. I'm like, oh, listen, go be an entrepreneur then. You can control how much money you have to give to, you know, whatever. You have to do your taxes still, but find out what brings you joy. If you don't want to work for somebody, then can you create a business, right? So can you do something with what you love? And eventually that's what you did. But I want to talk to you first about what was some of your experience like. So you go out to California and
Mhm.
you uproot everything you've done, 4 years of college, you've left your family behind. And
Mhm.
here's this girl in this big old world of all kinds of crazy. We have to admit there's all kinds of crazy out there, right? I lived in Southern California, so I understand. And I also have friends that have been in the acting world and things like that. There's all kinds of stuff that happens. Like, what did you do to start making your footprint there for yourself?
Oh my goodness. That's such an interesting question because I definitely wasn't strategic, I don't think, with it or calculated in a way that I could have been. And then I'll also say this was like what 2004-ish when I moved there. So the other thing that was different is that, you know, like content marketing wasn't necessarily a thing in the same way that it is now. So you know how you can Google like how to become a professional dancer, and now there's a ton of stuff out there, most of which or a lot of which I've written myself. But it's like that wasn't a thing. I had to kind of like figure out what to do. So one of the things that has always served me really well that I'll say is that like I always tend to find community, and then the community always leads the way. Like I always end up flourishing when I find community. So my approach then was like, okay, who do I know in California? I happen to have some college friends that I was able to connect with. And then friends from Houston introduced me to their friends, right? And so I tapped in. And then some type of way, I honestly can't remember how I found the very first dance studio. I'm sure it was some sort of like internet search. I found my way to a studio where I was able to start dancing with folks. And then they would introduce me to the next group and then the next group until I finally found the actual group of professionals that I needed to be around. So it was just like being planted in places that has, like, really been the most fruitful for me, quite honestly.
I love the main word I heard there was community. And I think that's such an important thing to take note of and to talk about for a moment is that community does, it's so important to have that right
Mhm.
community. I have a friend named Lisa Pulliam. She calls it your balcony people. Like
Mm.
who are those people that you can say, this is what I need, this is what I'm looking for, and get you there? Because like you said, you didn't have internet. I mean, internet wasn't around back then. I mean, I'm going to age myself. Cell phones, look it up on cell phones. Like, no, my kids barely had a handheld Game Boy thing, you know.
Yeah,
So it
yeah.
really wasn't around. You're thinking 20 years ago is what you're talking. And so having community is so important. It reminds me of my Shira League that we started our Shira League during COVID. So
Mm.
during COVID, I was seeing how, oh my gosh, I was watching on social media. I had friends on my Facebook and such that were like, oh my gosh, I have to be home with my kids and I have to learn to teach them math or English or all these things. And I send them to school because I'm not a teacher, you know, and then, oh my goodness, my spouse or my partner is home with me all day. And I love my family, but I basically, to wrap that up, Shaté, is I call it the Calgon take me away moments, but I'm not allowed to leave my house, right? Unless you're in the wicked stepchild state, I call it, of Florida, where we got away with some things, right? But you really, for the most part in the world, we weren't allowed to leave our home. So I
In
was like,
Georgia too. Georgia was
yeah,
a hot mess with that too.
yeah. So I was like, I got to do something. So
Yeah.
I created this 30-day of self care, and now we still have it. We call it the glow up challenge. But I started this 30-day of self care where every day for 30 days, you did something for yourself. And every Sunday, we would meet and talk about how was your week and how did you feel about that? How are you feeling right now? Like, what are you dealing with because of COVID and things like that? We had a really great group of women that started this journey. And so near the end of it, and I had also been holding retreats, right? So my retreat that year got put on hold because of COVID. And
Mhm.
so, my retreat at the end of every retreat, and now at the end of this 30-day thing, everybody's like, well, what can we do to stay together? Like, how do we keep in touch with one another? And I was like, I don't know. I've had this thing in my head. It's called Shiros, and it means strong, happy, empowered, radiant, and original self. I'm like, maybe we could do something with that. So I create the Shiro League during COVID and after
Nice.
retreats, and so now it's become this great community. We meet every Sunday evening from 8 to 9 p.m. Eastern time on Zoom. It's not recorded, and what's beautiful about it is not only is it the community, but it's a community that I created because I saw a need for other women. And
Yeah.
so we talk about our highs, our lows, and we lift up anything in between. We have amazing speakers that come in and talk about finance, health, our priorities and personal development and things like that. And the really great thing about creating this community, Shaté, is that I never realized when I started way back, during COVID, how in 2022 it was going to show up as a need that I was going to need. That
Mhm.
that July when we lost our son in that
Mm.
tragic car accident, all those women were like, get on a Shiro League right now. Like we got on Zoom and they just like poured into me. And some
Mm.
that lived here locally came to my house.
Yeah.
We never know when that community that we end up in is actually going to full circle, like really, and wrap us around that. And I think for your mom, I'm thinking your mom, we're talking about your mom a lot here in this. So I want you to make sure you share this episode with her. But I think for your
Okay.
mom, I feel like she probably took comfort in knowing that, okay, she's found a community. They're going to keep her safe. She's got a great head on her shoulders, and so I think that was probably brought a blessing to your mom. So
Yeah.
shout out to your mom. You gave her some peace there. But so you found this community and you're starting on this journey. How hard was it? Because let's face it, there's going to be people that are listening that have daughters or sons that want to get into dance. They want
Mhm.
to go to California, right? What would
Mhm.
you say was some of the biggest challenges to break into that field? And what would you give of advice to somebody that's thinking about doing that?
Yeah, it's a brutally difficult industry to be in, and it also has been incredibly rewarding. So I would say the reason why it felt brutally difficult, that was very dramatic language for me to use, but the reason it felt that way is like you have to put up with so much rejection. You have to face so many things. And thank goodness I didn't face any of the other more awful things that people experience in terms of, maybe harassment or sexual advancements or things like that. I was fortunate enough to not have experienced any of that. But it was just, people don't necessarily want to pay you, like, can you work for free? Can you, like, all of these things. And so early on, like, even finding those moments where I was like trying to find all these projects, these gigs before I had an agent, those are like kind of crappy sometimes unless you like actually just find some people with integrity. That's really like few and far between, unfortunately, and I don't think it's just an LA thing. I think people just like want to get away with not paying people things. Um but when you have an agent, all of that changes, right? So there are standards and minimums and things like that, but it's the constant sort of like having to compare yourself to other people or having to be compared to other people. You have to have like you almost have to have like a big ego, a certain arrogance about you in order to do the kind of projects that I was putting myself out to do, right? So to work with celebrities who have these really large, huge, mega presences, right? Of personalities and things like that, you have to have an energy to match that. So much so in my early stages of my career, I just wasn't that. Do you know what I mean? I was confident in my ability to dance and most of the time, but it was like I didn't have this sort of like ego. I was always downing myself and shrinking back and hiding and really afraid to be seen. So the story for me is I did a good amount of work in LA. Like I was doing a bunch of teaching and choreographing things and sort of some like independent work. But it wasn't until I left LA, quite honestly, and moved to the South, back to the South, is when my career really blossomed because I took all of the professional lessons that I learned in LA and like basically got all the work in the South. Do you know what I mean? Like it was just the projects that were here. Like I had a level of professionalism that, I was able to bring. I took it seriously. It wasn't like I have this other job and now I'm doing this on the side. And so it really, really helped me. So I would say the rejection is something that I think even though it's hard to experience, it's helped me in everything that I've done since because I know how to just like pick myself up and just keep going and going and going, even if I keep hearing, no, thank you for coming. And it's so many other things that I could talk for days and days and days about what it has given me in terms of even moving beyond a dance career. It's just, yeah.
Yeah, I think I love what you said too, because I'm thinking my brother-in-law, he has two cousins that are in the dance world in LA.
Mhm,
And I've watched them dance with, all kinds of mega stars on, at the different like award shows and their concerts and things like that.
mhm,
And I remember like they were little when they were what do you call it, the flower girls when they got married. And so my boys were with them too. And I remember watching them grow up and I'm like, wow, you have to be really strong to put up with like there's some big, let's face it, celebrities have some big personalities,
yeah,
and some big egos, as you said, right? Some of them
yeah,
are not as down to earth as what others are. And that's okay. That's their personality. But you have to be able to learn to adapt if you want, like you said, to be in that world, something you did. And I think it's really cool that you took those lessons and you said, you know what? This isn't a good fit for me here. I'm going to go back where I feel good and where I feel like I can grow because oftentimes like in our careers in our even in our businesses we don't look and do an audit of am I truly happy here.
yeah.
And and I think that does a lot for like talks about self-care as we do here is I think for ourselves we have to look and see like I do this thing what brings you joy. So when I work with my clients they have to give me 10 things that bring them joy. But I
Mhm,
tell them when they start, like I just onboarded a client last week. I'm like, listen, the first 6 weeks, you're not going to like me because you're going to
mm,
give me 10 things fast, but I'm going to question you on all 10 of those things. And I'm going to make you really dig deep and see, are they truly what brings you joy? Right. And so being able to do a self audit is what I got from you in there to say, I've learned a lot here, but this is not where I want to land. And I'm going to take these lessons and land where I feel better for me and I'm going to grow even more. And so that's what you did. And I think, that's a lesson for those that are listening to be like, when was the last time you did a self audit about, am I truly happy where I am? Am I truly content? Am I truly still bringing joy to myself? And if not, then what can you do to change that? So I think I love that
mhm.
you brought that up for us.
Can I just be honest though? You
Yeah.
make it sound so evolved and like intentional, and I really appreciate that. And the honest truth is like burnout made me do it. So I was
Oh.
in this world of LA where I had figured out the formula for me or a formula, right? I know now in hindsight that there were so many other strategies I could have probably tried in order to stay there, but at the time, you make decisions based on the information you have at the time. But I was like working overnight at a hotel so that I can be available during the day for auditions. Sometimes I would leave work at like 7 or 8 and go directly to an audition. I might sleep for a couple of hours after that. And then I would get up and go to class because that's where the networking happens. And then I would go to work. And so I wasn't sleeping well. I don't think I was eating well. I was just like, felt like I was on this hamster wheel. I wasn't getting the kinds of jobs that I wanted. And I just, at a certain point, I was just like, yeah, like, everything was like, I was frustrated with everything. I was exhausted. I just didn't feel like I had the money that I wanted. It was just like everything's wrong with everything. And so finally I was like, you know what? I haven't booked Beyonce yet. I'm quitting. I'm going to quit dance. And I actually left LA thinking I was quitting altogether. And I was like, I'm gonna probably go to interior design school because I love HGTV also. But yeah, I came back to Houston with my parents and I literally just slept for a month. Like I was just so burnt out and tired. And then once I started to feel like myself again and I called myself like, okay, while I start to pursue interior design, let me just go find a dance class to like stay in shape or just to like dip my toe in it. And I took like one class and like my career was just like completely on again immediately. So
But
it was
I'm glad you stopped and pointed that out, because burnout is a real thing, you know, and
mhm.
burnout can totally, like you said, it almost took you totally out of that career. I'm an
Mhm.
HGTV person too. I'm an addict for HGTV. Let's just
Yeah.
put that out there.
Yes.
But and the plug to HGTV, if you want to sponsor us at any time, we'll take that sponsorship.
Yeah.
But the thing is like you're right. Burnout can be a real thing, and it can, derail you to where you think this thing is not for me, and you stop it, and then later on in life you regret it, right? Like, oh
Yeah.
man, if I just like sought help, or I took a break and just like reevaluate, which kind of what you did. You went home and you slept for a month. Your body was like going, please girlfriend, give me a break,
Yes, exactly.
and then you just dabbled. It's like, but that's okay. So, for self-care, it's okay to say, I need to take a break. I need to take a break from all this craziness I'm doing. I'm not happy. I'm burnt out, whatever that
Mhm.
is, it's okay to take a break. I want people to hear from what you just shared, and for being honest. I appreciate you being vulnerable and saying, hey, it wasn't as easy as Pearl made it sound. I was very burnt out. And you know what? And I'm sure in that world, many people do, because like you said,
Yeah.
many people that want to break into that world, whether it's acting, dancing, whatever it is, like they're working this, like you said, this hamster wheel. And like I said, my brother-in-law is one of the girls. She's an amazing barber. So she's a barber for many people, including some of the
Mhm.
stars, when I understand, during the day, but she goes and does this dancing at night. So, and so
Nice.
she's found a way to balance it and make it work. But I'm sure if they were on here with us, they'd be like, oh yeah, Shaté, I get the burnout, they'd be like, I'm right there with you, girl. So
Yeah.
yeah, I love that you share that with us. So you go back to Houston, you dabble in it, and then what happens after that?
Yeah, I start exploring what the dance world had in the South, which I was sort of anti to before, which was like musical theater. And I was like, oh my gosh, I love theater. Like the storytelling is on a whole other level. Whereas before, you're performing and you're in service to this project, but it might not necessarily have a really profound message. Whereas with theater, especially if you're able to choose the shows that you're in, it's just like being able to choreograph The Color Purple, for example. I was like, that is still one of like the most fulfilling dance experience that I've had, because that was such a story of like renewal and like finding yourself and survival. So I started doing all the things that the South had to offer. So corporate gigs, theater, tons of teaching, of course. And then finally it was like, oh, I want to go to grad school. So I went to grad school, I got a master's in dance, and then I started teaching on the college level. And so I literally I spent about 4+ years in LA, and then I just kept working for like another 8 years or so before I transitioned into, some of the work that I do now. But it was really just like finding new ways to keep dance in my life and keep working with it.
That's so cool. Like you found a way to enjoy it, and then you looked at it differently too, right?
Mhm.
That's so. I love that show, the program, The Color Purple. So I can imagine
Mhm.
choreograph. That must have been so much fun, just based on the movie and everything. I could just imagine how fun that was. So now you took this joy of what you're doing, and you've moved into sort of a different type of career with it too. So
Mhm.
tell us like how that transpired. How did you go from doing what you were doing into helping clients with and tell everybody what you're doing with it now?
Yeah, absolutely. So it was really another chance thing. Like dance, I didn't choose dance, dance chose me, right? My parents just put me in it. It was like, oh my gosh, this thing stuck. Same thing for career work, which is interesting. I'm in grad school and, I had already had this career doing all these things, and I was still working a little bit in grad school, but maybe focusing on studying a little bit more. And I'm in the student office writing like my thesis so I can get out of there. And the department chair comes in and is like, hey, we have this career course for undergrads. It's about to start in 5 minutes. We don't have a teaching assistant. Like, can you do it? And she was like, "Can you would have to go like now." And I was like, "Yeah, sure. Why not? Like TAs get paid, like I'm clearly available at this time. And so yeah, I'll make some extra dough." And I got into this class and just fell in love with being able to like share with them everything I wish I had known when I was starting out. And like all these lessons, it just felt like it had somewhere to go now. All my hardships and trials had a place and a purpose now, And so I just started doing that, finding ways to pour into them in ways that I wish I had known. And then they'd come to me with questions like, well, how did you do this? Or can you help me with this? And then it turned into me like blogging about it. Right. So I built this blog called The Working Dancer. And it's like everything I wish my younger self had known, I just was putting it there. So taxes and, do I take this job or not? What to do when your parents aren't on board with it? Like just all of these things, your ego, your mindset, like just everything I wish I had known. And I even started writing for like Dance Magazine and Point, like all these kind of career focused articles. So by the time that I felt like my life had evolved enough to the point where I didn't want the lifestyle of a professional dancer, I was already doing this sort of career work in the interim or on the side. And so my transition when I left dance, it was kind of like, I'm ready for something more. I don't know what the more is. Let me keep doing all this fun stuff in the meantime, which was like the working dancer stuff. But it didn't dawn on me until probably about 6 to 9 months into doing that, like, oh, this is it. Like this is the thing. And so I just leveraged all of that work that I was doing into a corporate role, like career coaching in the workforce development space. So I did that for about 6 years until I branched out into my own, again, working independently at the top of this year. So now through Career Steward, I basically get to help creatives like me, like who have these like really interesting, maybe unrelated backgrounds and figure out how to like monetize and organize the things that bring them the most joy into independent work that they love.
I love that somebody saw you. Like, I can imagine that moment where you were in the right place at the right time. It says, hey,
Mm-hmm.
come, can you go do this? And you go do it. And then I always tell everybody that I work with, I tell my clients, I coach at a nonprofit. I always tell the ladies at the nonprofit, like, everybody has a story, and like,
Mm-hmm.
how do you pay forward your story so that others
Mm-hmm.
people can learn from your story? And
Mm-hmm.
in that moment, that person was saying, Shaté, can you do this? And it actually gave you the opportunity to share your story and put your story out to the world so other people can learn from you. They can learn some of the, like you said, some of the things you went through, the hardships, the joys, all those things that that you did, and you were giving them life lessons. Because oftentimes many people don't get some of those life lessons. They don't get those little drips of things that can help them as they bounce forward into their career life. And it's really powerful that when we can do that, I just love to, I'm always pushing my clients, whether you write the book or not, pay it forward to somebody. When you see somebody that looks like you or going through something you went through, sit down and be like, hey, you remind me of me. Can I just
Mm-hmm.
share it, right? Like share that. It doesn't have to be a book. It could just be anything. How can you leave sort of a legacy behind? I think it's great. So tell us, like, how do you help that person so that, you've shifted over now to where you can help these amazing people find joy and create, something for
Mm-hmm.
them. Walk us through how that happens when somebody comes to you. What are some of the things what's the journey for them?
Yeah, folks usually come to me in a couple of different buckets. It's usually like, okay, I sort of loathe or I'm only tolerating what I do now and I just can't stand to feel that way anymore. Or it is like I really know that I'm meant for something more, but I don't know what that more actually is. And there's another category of folks who've been like, okay, I know what I want to do next, but I don't know what the heck, like, how do I start? How do I begin? And then there's like another small group of people who's like, okay, I've done all these really cool things and now I don't know how to talk about it. Like, so even if you take me, for example, I could not have gotten a job in the corporate space as a career coach by talking about all the dance classes I've taught before, right? So there's so much about our career pivots, our business building that is storytelling that I think a lot of people sort of don't acknowledge or the value of it. So they come to me with some sort of opportunity block is essentially what I call it. Like you're trying to where you are doesn't fit anymore. You're trying to get to this new place and you either don't know what the new place is, you don't know how the heck to like get started and go there, or you're telling the wrong stories to get there. And so they come to me and I help them make sense of all of it. So I put all the pieces of who they are out on the table because I love puzzles. And then we start to connect the dots. Like that's where the strategy comes in. Like, okay, these are the trends and the patterns that I'm seeing from your background. This is what I think it actually could be a good fit for based on like what you say is important to you, what your interests and your values are. And then we start to get to work to like discuss like what the offer is for that. What's the story for that? Who are the people you're going to connect with? Because there's so much of it that is about community and networking and things like that. And so it is really about like how do they get the clarity, the confidence to have that more fulfilling body of work that I think everybody deserves.
And we forget to do that. We forget to look and get help with that. I was talking with somebody today. She gave me the best compliment. It was a new client I was working with, and we were talking about what we're going to be working on. And I asked her a question, and she's like, "You are the first one in over 20 years of me going to see therapists and everything like that that ever asked me the question. And now that you've said it, I realize that's what I need to work on. I haven't been working out for 20 years."
Mm,
Right. So and that was because, what I explained to her too is like, I'm a coach. So I'm not necessarily, I'm not a doctor. And I say that all the
mhm,
time. I'm not a doctor. I don't write scripts, nothing like that. But I'm a coach. And sometimes our doctors and our therapists, they get put in this box. They can only do so much for us, right? Because it's all they're allowed to do. That's all they've been trained to do. And so I was sharing with her that I have a couple of therapists that will refer their clients to me because they know I can do a little bit more. And what they combine the two of us together, we create this great thing for our clients, right? And so working with somebody like you, I that's what I was hearing. It's like, I have this idea. I want to do something with it. I'm not sure what to do with it. So guide me through, like, how do I find that?
mhm.
And it's, I think anybody's listening, if you're starting a new career, or if you're looking at starting a business or whatever that is for you, make sure you get somebody to help you ask the questions. Because I could tell you, as a business owner, I knew nothing about a business coach. I just went on my
Mhm,
own, like, oh, let's go.
mhm,
I want to do this. There's what I'm going to do. Right. And I
mhm.
think it's really important when you look back. If somebody always asks me, what's one thing you wish you would have done differently? And I said, the first thing I would have done was get a coach. Like, have a coach, make sure what I'm doing is lined up correctly, and I've got all the steps set up. And so I love that that's what you're doing, that you're taking what you did and you're applying that. You're helping them create their own dance program of their
Mhm.
life, as what came to
Exactly.
my mind as you were saying that,
Exactly.
right?
Yeah.
I think that's so cool. All right, so we're going to do a little shift here.
Okay.
Excuse me. So we all get busy in our lives. You get busy. Let's all admit that life can get crazy, overwhelmed, burnout, as we were talking about earlier, right? So in today's world for you, now that you've kind of come this journey, you understand what burnout looks like, you understand how it feels. What do you do for your self-care to help you not go down that path again of burnout? What are some of the things you implement for yourself?
Yeah, I have learned how to slow down. Like, I was in my 20s and early 30s, like, just in a rush to get somewhere, to go nowhere fast, as I heard someone say. Like, just going, 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 and that is how I burnt out, and so I slow down, I give myself moments to just rest. Like, I literally prioritize rest now. I also incorporate, things that are good for my body and my mind. Like, so I love taking walks outside. I love taking jogs outside. I journal regularly. That is a huge help. I am in therapy regularly. So that is also a huge help. And then I also have a spiritual practice. So it's like, it's a combination. There isn't just one thing. I have a full, like, well-being practice that I make sure I maintain so that I don't lose it.
It's called the tools in our toolbox, right? It's
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
I got to ground myself. I need to, if I need to talk it out, I've got somebody to
Mhm.
talk it out with.
Mhm.
You have those checks and balances in our lives, and that's really important when we put we do stuff for ourselves, because life gets so busy, it gets so
Mhm.
fast. And I tell her all the time, listen, and I'm a walking example of that. Life can change in a dime.
Mhm.
Losing our son, we literally talked to him 20 minutes before he passed in a car
Mhm.
accident. And it reminds me every day, life gets so busy. So tomorrow, somebody's going to come help clients do what you do, right? So if you're working at a career, somebody's going to sit in that seat you've been working on for that person or that company. And at your home, let's face it, they're going to learn how to take care of themselves. We don't have to do it all. And so if you don't put yourself first, and if you don't set up your self-care first, you're going to be burnt, you're going to lead to burnout. You're not going to have the tools to show up for your family, your career, whatever that is, the way you want to. And so I love that you gave us those examples of, this is what it means to be like, I've got to go self, I got to do something for me, because at the end of the day, something I always tell my clients when we're working together is, I'll ask them, and it's a tough question. So if you're listening to us, I would challenge you to do this right now, is that if unfortunately tomorrow, Shaté, I don't have the honor of hearing your voice across the world, and all your 5 closest friends can say they saw you do for yourself, right? What would they say? And if each one of those 5 friends can't say something different they saw you do for self, then you need to talk to me,
Mhm.
because I tell them we need to find those things because you are on burnt out, you're overwhelmed, and you're not finding harmony in your life. And I want you to have harmony in your life. I want people to fight over getting up to tell them, everybody in the audience, what they saw you do for yourself, right? We don't have to wear our titles. We don't have to wear our titles of wife, mom, PTA, volunteer, career, whatever that is. We have to wear our title, Shaté, of Pearl, of those that are listening, whatever your name is. You have to wear that title first. Growing up, Shaté, I hated my name growing up. I used to tell my mom, can I please change my name? My name is 3 generations old. I was named after my aunt, who was named after my great aunt. And the thing is like, I was short and my maiden name was Nap. So I was called Mini Pearl, Pearl Go Take a Nap, Pearl Harbor, everything you could think of. Like I was called it, right? And so I used to come home and cry to my mom, can I please change my name? She's like, you can't change your name. And it wasn't until 2015 when I was sitting in an identity and destiny course and I had to give my I am statement. I still, after 6 weeks, Shaté, after 6 weeks, I still was saying I was all these titles. And somebody sitting in the course called me out. My partner at the course said, where is Pearl? And I was like, oh my gosh, where am I? And so I had to sit back and go, I'm more than my titles. And now today, like I brand myself everything with my name. Everything I if I don't have pearls on there, you better ask me what's wrong with me because everything I do is all around having some sort of pearl on my body because I embrace that who I am, and I say all the time, find your inner pearl to greatness because truly, we have that inner self that's just dying to come out. That little girl or that little boy for listening that was like, I want to do this when I grow up. And you've kind of pushed them down. They want to get back out and let them out because it's a beautiful thing when we can do that. So I love that. I love that you share that with us. And I love that you do those things because it's really, really important. So tell everybody how they can find you, Shaté, how they can connect with you.
Yeah, I've got a really amazing resource. So we just talked about sort of like finding your joy throughout life and all of the interesting, amazing pivots that life can throw your way. So putting all of those together into like who your story is. What is your I am statement? That's a really great way to say it. And segue, I would actually say pearls of wisdom is like the first thing I thought of when I thought of pearl. So kids are crazy. Don't listen to them. And I'm glad you're owning it now. But in terms of what I have to offer, I've got what it's called the multi-hyphenates manifesto. So it is like this declaration of like, I'm not going to fit in anybody's box. I'm not going to like do things somebody else's way. It's a really short, sweet, simple tool to help someone mine their top skills, their hidden talents, and start to think about the combinations of skills that matter to them most that they could possibly organize and monetize. And so it's a really cool resource. I'm really proud of it. You can find it at lightmycareermatch.com.
And we're going to put all those in the show notes for everybody to see as well, so that everybody can find that and see that. And we'll put all the links to Shaté as well in there for everybody to connect with her and get some access to her. And I love, I know that, part of your Shiro story is going from that professional dancer, to that corporate career, now the workforce development. I think it's amazing hearing your story today. I can see how you've led programs and the consulting companies into what they're doing today. And I love that, that you're honoring where you came from, you're honoring who you are today, and you're honoring how you can help others have that dream, career or whatever that is for them. I think it's an amazing thing that you're doing because we need more of you in this world to help us. Life can be rough, right now there's some crazy stuff happening in our world and we get so honed in on all that stuff. When I tell everybody, listen, you can only control the 4 walls you live in, the car you drive. And so all the other stuff, it's just noise. So what are you doing for yourself right now? What's the noise you're creating in your world and your life that you want? And if it's not the right people, then surround yourself with the community, as you said, that will do that. And that's why, we have the Shiro League, because we're a great diverse amount of people. So I really love that we're creating that for women. And I think it's a great thing what you're doing. We need more people like you in the world, Shaté, for sure. So it's been fun having you on the show. So now everybody understands, we do these Better Questions, Better Life. If you're new to our show, my friend Carol Gill and her friend Diane Allen created these cards. There's over 70 cards. So I keep half upstairs and half downstairs. But there's 70 cards that you can pull every day, that you can journal on it, you can meditate on it, you can take a picture and carry it with you, whatever it is. But I always love to have my guests tell me when to stop, and we're going to talk about the card you pull. So tell me when to stop, and we'll see what your card says. All right. So yours says, how can I be kinder to myself? That's a good one. How can
Ooh.
you be kinder to yourself, Shate?
Oh my gosh, I'm just gonna just say what's come up out of my journaling recently. The way that I can be kinder to myself is to stop making myself responsible for other people's happiness. I have like, we talked about me being in therapy, and so I've sort of learned how like my perfectionism and people pleasing and all of that kind of has shown up in the world, and how I've sort of like learned or taught myself to try not to be a burden to other people. And like, I just sort of like just take on the responsibility of someone else's like success or joy or happiness or whatever the thing is. And it just like weighs at me. Like, I get so anxious, like, oh my gosh, if I don't like do the things so that they're okay, I failed, or insert whatever dramatic other thing it happens. And just yesterday, it was coming up in my journaling, like, who, why am I doing that? Like, why am I being responsible for the other person's happiness? And like, that's actually called codependency. And so, like, you need to put that down. And like, the moment that I did, it was just like this weight was lifted. So the way that I can be kinder to myself is to, um, really focus on just being responsible for my own happiness. I can still have love for people and nurture them and support them and do all the things that I want to do for the sake of them and their joy. But I need to also like honor my joy as well.
Okay, as a recovering people pleasing addict, you just hit the chord for me. I mean, that's exactly when I started doing this work on myself. That's what came up for me, Shate, was I was a people pleaser. Like you
Mhm.
probably could have asked me to come organize your sock drawer. I was like, "What time you want me there?" I probably would have been there before you finished the sentence. That's how bad it was, and it's so true. Like I remember, I had as I started doing this journey, I remember saying to myself, "Wow, I show up for everybody. That's why I wear these titles, right?" And so
Yeah.
we have to, because, and we've been talking about this all along in the show, like you have to put yourself first, because you can't find that joy if you worry about, oh my gosh, that person's not happy because of this. I have a family member right now. We're helping her go through some stuff, and she's not making choices that, we either agree to or she commits to. And I'm like, okay, then you're going to have the consequences. It's not my consequences or
Mhm.
your consequences. Right. And,
Mhm.
I have a friend that's staying with me right now, and she'll tell me, you have probably the most kindest heart there is, Pearl, but sometimes it gets in your way. And I'm like, yeah, it shows up sometimes. I'm really worked hard. I mean, where I was in 15 and almost 10 years later today is totally different. In fact,
Yeah.
like 2 days before my son passed, he was here. One of the best memories I have, and the last memory I've had with him, is he was here in the garage, and he was working with my husband. They own a business together. They were taking care of some stuff. It's like, hey mom, can you throw me a bottle of water? I'm like, sure. So I chuck the water across the garage to him. And it's like, wow, not only have you found out who you are, but you finally have an arm, because I could never throw a football to him. And I'm like, well, that was really cool. And what heard me, the thing I heard is he saw me. He saw me figure
Yeah.
out who Pearl was,
Yeah.
And I think that was just such a powerful, powerful ending memory, that, the last memory I have with him, and that I have to continue doing that, not just for me, but as, somebody who's grieving, and the worst thing in the world is losing a child, is to have to live every day in grief. I miss him every day. I think about him every day, but I know that because I've worked so hard to be where I am today, I have to
Mhm.
keep doing the work. Sometimes it's harder on certain days. It can be a lot harder. But
Mhm.
when we know who we are, and we release the fact that we think we can help and control somebody else's joy, we're actually holding them back. And we're doing the work for them. And they're like, oh, she's going to take care of it for me. I don't need to worry about it. Right. So
Yeah.
when we stop doing that, then what happens to those that are listening, when you start setting boundaries, then they want to break those boundaries, because they're like, well, you always did, or you always
Mhm.
help, right? So now it's like,
Mhm.
yep, nope, you've got this. You can figure this out. So it's one of the hardest things in the world to do, but that's the best thing you can do, not just for yourself, but for that person as well. So
Yeah.
I'm glad you went there, because it's a great way to end the show. It's a great way to remind everybody that throughout this episode today, we've talked about community, about, avoiding the burnout for yourself, but finding the joy of what you like to do, and live in that joy, and do the things you enjoy doing. So, Shaté, I want to thank you so much for coming on today and being part of this episode. It's so exciting to have you here. And I can't wait to see the other big things you have coming. And we'll put all your contacts in the show notes. And so if anybody's interested in learning more about the Shiro League that I've talked about today, all you have to do is email info@wsliving.com and just put Shiro in the subject section, and I will get you the information. But in the meantime, I want to remind everybody that as we've been talking about today, you have to find your inner joy, and you have to go and understand you are this rough shell on the outside. You are this oyster that in this world is trying to figure out where the heck am I going to land? What's my community? What's my joy? But as you do the work and you find and open up that shell, you will find your inner pearl of greatness. So I hope everybody who's with us today has got some tips and tricks and some fun conversation to go find your inner pearl of greatness today. Thank you so much.